You know those family gatherings where everyone pretends everything's fine, but the second someone pours the gravy, all the buried drama starts bubbling up? Yeah, that was our Thanksgiving this year. But unlike other years, I wasn't just a passive observer at the table. This time, I was the target. And I wasn't about to sit back and take it. Not after what my nephew said. Not after all I'd done for this family. And definitely not when I had a very particular contact in my phone who could end his little power trip with a single call. My name's Mason. I'm 46, live alone in a quiet suburb outside Austin, Texas, and I've spent the better part of 2 decades building a life most people in my family never really understood or appreciated. I'm a consultant in the infrastructure space, mostly private contracts, some federal work. I'm not flashy. I don't wear a Rolex or pull up to family dinners in a Tesla. I drive a 2011 Lexus, wear the same Patagonia jacket year-round, and most days, I work from a converted sunroom in my backyard with a space heater and my dog Ringo curled up at my feet. To the outside world, and especially to my family, I probably look like some quiet guy who never made it. And I've been fine with that. I never felt the need to explain how my low-key life was, in fact, the result of very deliberate choices. I got tired of the hustle, the airport lounges, the fake conversations. I made enough smart moves in my 30s that I could coast if I wanted to. But I still take on a few select projects a year. Not for money, for curiosity. My sister Veronica, though, she's never stopped judging me. And now that her oldest son, Brandon, just turned 26 and landed a shiny new tech job, she's convinced he's the future of the family. Her words, not mine. Thanksgiving at my sister's house has always been a show. She hosts with the kind of performative enthusiasm that makes your face hurt from smiling. There's a place card at every seat, a 3-tiered dessert tray, custom chalkboard signs with words like gratitude and family is everything. And beneath it all, a bubbling cauldron of subtle insults, status games, and quiet one-upping that never seems to run out of fuel. I considered skipping this year. Honestly, I've been close to skipping every year. But my mom asked me to come. She's 78, and the only real reason I ever show up to these things. She likes seeing the whole family together, even if it's a dysfunctional display of forced cheer and passive aggression. And I know she worries about me being alone on the holidays, even though I actually like my solitude. But for her, I came. I arrived with a bottle of Malbec and my usual quiet energy, nodding to my brother-in-law Dan as I stepped inside. He's harmless, more of a furniture piece than a person in these gatherings. He chuckled, handed me a drink, and disappeared back to the grill like he always does. I spotted Brandon almost immediately, slicked back hair, oversized watch, Apple Vision Pro goggles still around his neck like some kind of VR scarf. He was talking loudly to a cluster of cousins about a client escalation he handled that week. I rolled my eyes and walked toward the living room. We sat down to eat around 4. The table was immaculate, of course. Matching plates, miniature pumpkins, a handwritten menu. Veronica always went all out. Everyone took turns going around the table to say what they were thankful for, a tradition I usually endure in silence. My turn came, and I gave a simple answer. I'm thankful Mom's here, and that Ringo didn't get sprayed by another skunk this month. That got a polite laugh from the cousins. Veronica forced a smile. Brandon rolled his eyes. Then it happened. Not the big blow-up. Not yet. But the moment I should have known this year would be different. Brandon leaned forward, smirking. Uncle Mason, he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. What exactly do you do again? I keep forgetting. Now, this wasn't the first time Brandon had asked me this. It was, however, the first time he'd done it with that tone. The one kids use when they think they're finally smarter than you. The tone of a rising tech bro who just discovered stock options and thinks anyone without a blue check mark in a startup is wasting oxygen. I smiled calmly. Same thing I've done for years. I consult on infrastructure projects. What kind of projects? He pressed. I worked on the interstate expansions a few years back. Some utility grid work more recently. Mostly project strategy, compliance frameworks, and budget optimization. He blinked. So like spreadsheets. Sometimes, I said, still smiling. But the kind of spreadsheets that keep cities running. He laughed. Wow. Okay. So you're basically the guy behind the guy who talks to the guy. A few chuckles. His younger brother Mason Jr. Yes, they named him after me. Looked uncomfortable. My mom gave me a soft pat on the hand. like she knew I was holding back. Veronica just sipped her wine and pretended not to hear. I wanted to let it go. I really did. But Brandon wasn't done. Honestly, he added, stabbing a piece of turkey, I don't get why someone smart like you never built something real. You just consult. It's like being a substitute teacher, but for businesses. The room went quiet. Now here's the thing. I don't need validation. Not from him. Not from Veronica. Not from anyone at that table. But there's a fine line between being humble and being humiliated. And Brandon was trying to cross it. So I took a slow sip of wine, locked eyes with him, and said, You know, Brandon, not everyone needs to build an app that fails in 2 years just to feel important. The silence got heavier. He chuckled again, trying to brush it off. Relax, Uncle Maze. I'm just saying, in today's world, you either innovate or you get left behind. I looked around the table. No one was jumping in. Not even Dan. Typical. But then Brandon said the one thing that flipped a switch in me. The thing that set everything in motion. He leaned back in his chair, looked me dead in the eye, and said, Let's be real. You're just a nobody who got comfortable. That was it. My jaw clenched. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Because what Brandon didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that I had been talking to his boss for the last 3 months. His boss, Eric, was an old college friend of mine. We'd reconnected at a conference back in July. Grabbed dinner. Talked about work. Caught up on life. And last week, Eric called me up to talk about a problem employee who'd been slacking, showing attitude, and possibly leaking confidential data through unapproved channels. He never said the name. But after that comment, I had a strong feeling I knew exactly who it was. I looked across the table at Brandon and smiled. I'm sure your boss would be proud of how you carry yourself, Brandon, I said softly. What's his name again? Eric Wilkins. His face froze. His fork stopped midair. You know Eric? I nodded. Old friend. Played rugby together in college. We talk now and then. In fact, we talked just last week. The color drained from his face. Veronica looked confused. What's that got to do with anything? She asked, her voice sharper now. Oh, nothing, I said lightly. Just catching up. He mentioned he was evaluating a few people. Said one of them was a bit entitled. Brandon suddenly looked like someone had swapped his turkey for a live grenade. I didn't say anything else. Not yet. But in that moment, with the air thick and everyone suddenly alert, I knew the tide had turned. And what happened next? Well, let's just say Thanksgiving wasn't over yet. Brandon barely spoke for the rest of dinner. He pushed his food around like a kid who'd just been told recess was canceled, barely making eye contact with anyone. Every once in a while, I'd catch him looking my way with this mix of confusion and panic, like he was trying to do the math in his head. How close is Uncle Mason with Eric? What did Eric say about me? Did I screw something up? I didn't give him anything. Just small talk with my mom. A couple polite laughs with the cousins. I wasn't about to air it out at the table, but the power dynamic had shifted. And he knew it. The kid who just called me a nobody was suddenly checking his phone under the table like it was a lifeline. After dessert, which, by the way, Veronica introduced with a speech about hard work and young ambition, clearly meant as a thinly veiled love letter to Brandon. People started breaking off into little clusters. Football in the den. Coffee in the kitchen. Some of the younger kids were outside in the yard kicking a soccer ball around. I wandered into the living room and sat down near the fireplace, taking a moment to decompress. My mom came over and sat beside me, resting her hand gently on my arm. You all right? She asked softly. I nodded. Yeah, just tired. She looked over at Brandon, who was in the kitchen with Veronica. He didn't have to say that, she muttered. You're not a nobody, Mason. I'm sorry he said that. I patted her hand. It's okay, Mom. Really. But inside, I wasn't okay. I wasn't even close. See, I could have let it end there. Could have gone home, chalked it up to another awkward family gathering, and moved on. But something about the way Veronica had looked at me when she said, What's that got to do with anything? Like my opinion didn't matter, like my connection couldn't possibly carry any weight, stuck with me. And something about Brandon's smugness, that entitlement, that complete lack of respect for anyone who wasn't impressed by his LinkedIn page, that lit a fire. I stayed for another hour or so, mostly out of courtesy to my mom. But the atmosphere had shifted. Brandon kept darting in and out of the room, whispering to Veronica. At one point, I saw her glancing at me, then typing something on her phone with rapid thumbs. Probably texting him, just apologize and smooth it over. But he never did. When I finally stood up to leave, Veronica approached me at the door. "Thanks for coming," she said, all smiles and fake warmth. "It's always nice when the whole family's together." I nodded. "Sure. Tell Dan the turkey was great." She tilted her head. "You know, Mason, I think Brandon struck a nerve earlier. But I hope you don't take it personally. He's just passionate." I looked her dead in the eye. Passion without humility isn't ambition. It's arrogance. She blinked, unsure how to respond. I didn't wait for one. Just pulled my coat on, gave Mom a hug, and headed out into the chilly night air. The next morning, my phone buzzed around 9 a.m. It was Eric. "Hey man," he said. "You free to talk for a sec?" I stepped out into my backyard, coffee in hand. "Yeah, what's up?" Eric sighed. "So, that kid I mentioned last week. The one we were reviewing." "Yeah." Turns out he did exactly what we suspected. Forwarded some sensitive project data to a personal drive. Said it was just for remote access, but we have policies against that. "Name?" I asked, though I already knew. "Brandon. Brandon Miles." I exhaled slowly, watching the steam rise off my coffee. Eric continued. "I know you said he was your nephew, and I didn't want to overstep, but I figured you'd want to know. What are you thinking?" I asked. "We're still deciding. There are two people on the chopping block right now. One's Brandon. The other is a guy who's underperforming but not breaking any rules." I was leaning toward giving Brandon a pass. You know, young guy, lots of potential. But now, he paused. "Now I'm thinking we need to send a message." I didn't tell Eric what had happened at dinner. Didn't need to. The wheels were already turning. But I did say one thing. Whatever you decide, make sure it's someone who respects the people around him. The company. The rules. "I hear you," Eric said. "We'll finalize things Monday." I hung up, heart still pounding. I wasn't sure what was about to happen, but I knew it wasn't over. That weekend, I kept a low profile. Didn't text anyone in the family. Didn't check Facebook. Just took Ringo for long walks, caught up on some reading, and waited. Monday came and went without incident. Then Tuesday morning, I woke up to a single text from Brandon. "Did you talk to Eric?" That was it. No greeting. No context. Just that question. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back. I didn't need to. No reply. By noon, my sister was calling. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted. Then called again. Finally, I picked up on the third try. "What did you do?" she demanded. No hello. No preamble. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly. "Mason, don't play dumb. Brandon just got a notice that he's being evaluated for a possible termination. Eric said the decision was made over the weekend. You were at dinner with us, and suddenly you're in Eric's ear? What did you say?" I kept my tone even. I didn't tell Eric anything he didn't already know. He called me, not the other way around. Veronica's voice cracked. He said Brandon violated protocol, that he was careless with confidential info. That's not like him. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? She fell silent. Veronica, I've been patient. For years. I've watched you prop him up, enable him, let him walk around with that smug attitude like the world owes him something. I stayed quiet through all the backhanded comments, the judgment, the lectures about real jobs. But Thursday? That crossed a line. He's just a kid, Mason. He's 26. Old enough to know better. Old enough to face consequences. There was a pause. Then she dropped the real bomb. Mom's upset. She said you embarrassed the family. She said you threatened Brandon. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was pathetic. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply reminded Brandon that the world is smaller than he thinks. You always do this, she snapped. You think because you're quiet and mysterious and you know a few people in high places, you can just mess with our lives. Well, guess what? This isn't your playground, Mason. You don't get to control everything. I'm not trying to, I said. But I also don't owe you silence anymore. She hung up. I sat there for a while, staring at the blank screen. The call had left me shaking. Not from fear. From anger. From sadness. From the realization that this wasn't just a one-off Thanksgiving insult. This was years of quiet dismissal, finally boiling over. I thought back to all the other family events. The birthday parties where Brandon got expensive gifts while I brought thoughtful ones and got polite nods. The way Veronica would say things like, "Mason's just more of a minimalist," whenever someone asked about my life, as if that explained everything. The way I was always asked to take the group photos, never be in them. It all made sense now. To them, I was a placeholder, a quiet uncle, a background character in the story of Brandon's rise. And the worst part? I'd let them write me that way. Until now. What happened next, how it all unraveled, wasn't part of my plan. I hadn't orchestrated it. But I sure as hell wasn't going to stop it either. Because when the truth finally came out, it was worse than any of us expected. The fallout came quickly. By Thursday morning, the entire family knew. It started with a Facebook post from Brandon's fiancée, something vague like, "People show their true colors when their ego's threatened." Then came the private messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in months, asking, "Hey, did something happen with Brandon and his job?" One even said, "I heard you got him fired. Is that true?" No one asked how I was doing. No one asked if maybe there was more to the story. They just assumed I was the villain, the jealous uncle, the bitter, middle-aged man who couldn't handle the success of the younger generation. And I'll admit, for a moment, I let it get to me. Friday afternoon, I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at my phone, rereading a text from my aunt. One that simply said, "Mason, whatever this feud is, fix it before it breaks the family." My stomach sank. Not because I cared what she thought, but because it hit me that this wasn't a feud. It was a purge, and I was being cast out. By Sunday, I was completely iced out. I wasn't tagged in the Thanksgiving family photo Veronica posted. I wasn't mentioned in any of the comments. Even my younger cousin Tyler, the one I used to help with college applications, had unfriended me. The message was clear: Mason's out. It was weird how fast the isolation hit. One week you're passing the mashed potatoes, the next, you're a cautionary tale. The guy who couldn't keep his mouth shut. The guy who burned bridges. And for a few days, I let that narrative seep in. I stopped checking my messages. Skipped my morning walks with Ringo. Barely touched the pasta I'd made on Sunday night. I even considered emailing Eric to tell him maybe he'd made a mistake. That Brandon didn't deserve to lose everything over one misstep. That maybe I had stirred the pot too much. But I didn't. Because somewhere beneath all the guilt and loneliness, I felt something stronger. Relief. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't smiling through clenched teeth while people who barely knew what I did for a living passed judgment on my worth. I wasn't playing the humble uncle role while Brandon gave TED Talks at the dinner table. For the first time in a long time, I was just me. No more scripts. No more nodding along. And in that silence, in the ache of exclusion, something started to shift. On Monday, I woke up early and went for a run. Not a jog. A run. Heart pounding, lungs burning, Ringo sprinting beside me. I pushed myself through 5 miles, came home drenched in sweat, and collapsed onto the floor with a grin that surprised even me. By noon, I was back in my office, the sunroom with the space heater and the French press, and I started sorting through my old project files. Half-finished proposals, unanswered emails, opportunities I'd let sit idle for too long. And then, like a bolt from the blue, I remembered an email from 6 months ago, one I hadn't followed up on. It was from a startup in Denver working on high-efficiency modular bridges for rural counties, something right in my wheelhouse. At the time, I'd ignored it. Too much family noise. Too many maybe-laters. I opened the email, read through the proposal, and clicked reply. Still interested in collaborating? I've got some bandwidth and ideas. I hit send. That small act, that one deliberate decision, became the first brick in what would quietly become the most fulfilling chapter of my career. The next week, I booked a short trip to Denver. Paid my own way. Met with the startup team. Talked shop. Spitballed ideas over coffee. They were young, bright, and eager, but missing real-world experience. I offered to come on as a strategic advisor, part-time. They agreed on the spot. 2 weeks later, we had a pilot proposal sent to 3 counties in Colorado. By Christmas, we were greenlit in one of them. While my family was passing around eggnog and pretending I didn't exist, I was knee-deep in engineering schematics and budget optimizations, and loving every second of it. Funny how things work. I didn't post about it. Didn't email the family a "look what I'm doing" update. I just worked. Quietly. Patiently. Letting the results speak for themselves. Meanwhile, the silence from my family stretched on. My mom called on Christmas Eve. She always does. Said she missed me. Asked if I was eating enough. Said she didn't want to choose sides, but that things had gotten out of hand. I could hear the strain in her voice, that sadness of a mother watching her kids drift further apart. "I just don't understand why he'd throw away such a good job," she said softly. Brandon had everything going for him. I sighed. That's the thing, Mom. He thought he could never lose it. There was a pause. Did you really talk to his boss? I didn't need to, I repeated. His own actions spoke for themselves. She didn't push further, just said she loved me and that the door was always open. That night, I sat on the couch with Ringo, a blanket around my shoulders and a mug of hot cider in my hands. I watched It's a Wonderful Life, and for the first time in years, the ending didn't feel like fiction. See, for most of my life, I'd let people define me by what I wasn't. Not married, not ambitious enough, not flashy, not successful enough, not loud, not confident enough. But slowly, day by day, I was remembering who I actually was. The guy who kept projects on time and under budget. The guy who helped counties rebuild bridges after storms. The guy who paid off Mom's mortgage without ever mentioning it. The guy who once mentored a kid through community college who now runs a city planning firm. I wasn't a nobody. I was just quiet. And now, I was done being quiet about the things that mattered. January rolled in with a fury of snowstorms across the Midwest, and suddenly our pilot project was being cited in statewide emergency prep discussions. The modular bridge we'd helped design, it held up during a flash flood that washed out 2 others nearby. Eric texted me a link to the local news coverage with a simple, "That's your work, man. Proud of you." I smiled. Then I got another text from someone I didn't expect. "Brandon, do you have a minute to talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I hadn't heard from him since that single, "Did you talk to Eric?" message weeks ago. No apology, no clarification, just silence. And now here he was, reaching out. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I closed my phone, walked to the window, and looked out at the snowy street below. Ringo barked softly beside me, tail thumping. I was no longer the man sitting in the shadows. I was rising, quietly, steadily, but the question still lingered in my mind. Why now? What did Brandon want? What was coming next? And was I ready for it? Brandon's message sat there like a ghost. Simple, unassuming, but it carried the weight of everything left unsaid. "Do you have a minute to talk?" I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have things to say. I did, and they weren't polite. But the truth is, I'd moved past needing anything from him. I didn't want an apology wrapped in manipulation. I didn't need a half-hearted, "I messed up, but you overreacted too." I wasn't interested in opening the door just to be judged again. So I waited. 2 days later, he texted again. "Please, I just want to talk." Still, I said nothing. Then the third message came. "Uncle Mason, I'm in a bad spot. I need your help. I swear this isn't about Thanksgiving." That one made me pause, because it sounded real. I didn't trust it. Not yet. But it was enough for me to reply with a single word. "Call." No pleasantries. No emojis. Just the offer. If he wanted to talk, he could do it with his voice. He called within 30 seconds. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. His voice was strained, but trying too hard to sound casual. "Hey, thanks for responding." I didn't say anything. "I know things got weird," he continued awkwardly. "And I know I crossed a line. But I really didn't mean to disrespect you. I don't know. I thought you were cool with the jokes. I didn't know you knew Eric. That whole thing blindsided me." There it was. Not, "I was wrong." Not, "I regret how I treated you." Just, "I didn't know you had power." I stayed quiet. Brandon cleared his throat. "Look, I'm in trouble. Real trouble." After the review, Eric didn't just let me go. He reported the incident to the company's legal team. Said it violated contract terms. Now they're pushing to recover damages over the security breach. I blinked. "Wait, they're suing you." "Not directly," he rushed. "Yet. But there's talk. And the worst part is, I can't find a new job. Everyone's either ghosting me or rejecting me last minute. I think Eric put something in my file. Like some red flag. No one's saying it, but I can feel it. Doors are closing." My mind raced. That didn't sound like Eric. He was firm, but fair. He wouldn't blacklist a guy unless there was more to the story. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. Brandon hesitated. "Because I know you're connected. And because I don't know who else to call. Mom's panicking. Dad's useless. And he trailed off, then said, quieter, "I messed up. Big time." I didn't reply, just let the silence stretch. Finally, he added, "I heard about the bridge project. Eric mentioned it before he cut me off. Said you were doing real work again. I figured maybe you'd let me help out. Learn from you. Shadow you. Whatever." I almost laughed. Shadow me? After all that? He wanted to ride my coattails now? But something in his voice caught me off guard. He wasn't cocky. He wasn't baiting me. He was scared. And that scared kid part of him, the part one used to help build Lego sets with when he was 8, the part that used to look up to me before Veronica got in his head, that part stirred something in me. "Let me think about it," I said flatly. "I'll call you back." I hung up. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I started digging. Not to be nosy, not to punish, but because something didn't sit right with me. If Brandon had truly leaked confidential data, Eric would have terminated him cleanly and moved on. A black mark, sure, but not legal action. That meant the breach was more serious, which meant Brandon was either lying or hiding something worse. I called Eric that evening. "I figured you'd be calling," he said. "Is it true," I asked, "that you're pushing legal?" Eric sighed. "We didn't want to. But once we started auditing his accounts, we found something bigger. He didn't just transfer data to his own drive. He forwarded proprietary design docs to a competitor." My stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" Eric's tone hardened. "We've got email logs. A flagged domain. The startup's still small. They didn't know what they were looking at, thank God. But it's bad, Mason. It's industrial espionage, even if he didn't realize the implications." I sat there, stunned. "I thought about warning you," Eric said, "but I figured you'd keep your distance." I did. Until today. There was a long pause. Then Eric said something that made my blood go cold. "And one more thing. He listed you as a reference on one of his job applications." "What?" "Yup. Claimed he worked with you on a few confidential projects in the past. Even mentioned the modular bridge pilot. I only caught it because someone from a hiring board reached out to verify." I felt the anger rise like a tide. So that was the game. Brandon wasn't just reaching out for help. He was trying to co-opt my credibility, sneak into my lane under the guise of learning from me. And now? Now I was done playing nice. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest. Not just because of what he did, but because of the pattern. The assumption that no matter how he treated me, I'd always be there. The safe, quiet uncle. The one who wouldn't retaliate. Well, this time, he'd chosen the wrong scapegoat. And I had the receipts. Over the next few days, I began to lay the groundwork. I reached out to an old contact from a legal compliance firm I used to consult for, not to sue Brandon, but to get an airtight timeline of my own involvement in the bridge project, complete with NDAs, timestamped emails, and advisory agreements. I wanted it all documented, in case he tried to implicate me by association. I then contacted the Denver startup. I told them Brandon might reach out under false pretenses, possibly claiming past work or connections. I warned them to be careful. They were grateful for the heads up. Then I set up a meeting with a journalist I'd known for years, someone who wrote for a regional business journal. We'd talked in the past about doing a piece on public-private infrastructure innovations. I told him I was ready. But this time, I didn't just want to highlight the bridge. I wanted to talk about integrity, about silent contributors, about how trust can make or break a project. He was intrigued. "Is there a story behind the story?" he asked. "Not one I'm ready to name," I replied. "But let's just say some lessons come the hard way." We set the interview date for next week. And finally, with all the chess pieces in motion, I crafted one last move. I drafted an email to Brandon. Short, polite, precise. "Brandon, after our recent conversation, I looked into your situation further. I've since learned that you listed me as a reference without my permission and claimed involvement in projects where you had no role. This is unacceptable. I am formally requesting that you remove my name from any job materials or correspondence going forward. If you fail to do so, I will pursue formal action to protect my professional reputation. I hope you find clarity in this difficult season, but I will no longer be a part of your story. Mason." I hit send. And with that, I waited for the storm. Waited for the moment the world, or at least his world, would shift. Because the final act hadn't started yet. But the stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise. The email was sent. No threats, no anger, just boundaries. And it must have hit harder than I expected, because for the first time in months, Brandon stayed silent. Not a single reply. No defensive text. No, "You misunderstood," or "I didn't mean it like that." Just complete radio silence. The kind that either means someone's thinking very carefully or scrambling to do damage control behind the scenes. But I didn't wait for him to respond. I had no intention of giving him space to explain, twist, or apologize. Because this wasn't about one act of betrayal. It was about a lifetime of disrespect from him, from Veronica, from the whole rotten culture that they built together. The arrogance, the dismissiveness, the entitlement. So I did what I always do best. I worked quietly, and I executed perfectly. The journalist came by that Friday. James Prescott, sharp guy, early 40s, wire-rimmed glasses, and a keen instinct for sniffing out stories hiding under the radar. We spent 2 hours talking in my sunroom, while Ringo snored at our feet. He asked about the bridge project, but what really intrigued him was the way I described my journey. Stepping back from corporate life, prioritizing purpose over prestige, rebuilding infrastructure without making noise. At one point, he asked, "How did you get connected with the Denver team?" I smiled. I didn't chase it. They reached out. People tend to find you when you're quietly solving real problems. He grinned and jotted that down. I never once mentioned Brandon's name. Never hinted at our family drama. I didn't need to. But I made sure one quote made it into the piece. The biggest risk in any project isn't technical. It's human. One wrong ego in the room can burn down years of work. The article went live on Monday morning. The quiet architect behind Colorado's resilient infrastructure. How one man's low-profile vision is reinventing public-private partnerships. It took off faster than I expected. Picked up by a few national blogs. Shared by some local government forums. Even got a shout-out from the Department of Transportation's regional Twitter account. But more importantly, it showed up on LinkedIn. And that's where the real shift began. Suddenly, I was the name being whispered in professional circles. Recruiters reached out. Old colleagues commented with praise. And best of all, people from Brandon's world started noticing. I didn't have to dig. They came to me. On Wednesday, I got a call from a hiring board committee member from a major consultancy in Dallas. "Hey, Mason. Quick question. Did you ever actually supervise or work with a Brandon Miles? He listed you as a reference on his submission packet last month." I chuckled softly. "He's my nephew. But no, we've never worked together professionally." A pause on the line. "Interesting," the guy said. "He claimed direct involvement in the Denver project and referenced you as his team lead." "I'd be careful with him," I said flatly. That's all I'll say. The man thanked me, then hung up. I knew that phone call wasn't the only one happening. Behind the scenes, Brandon's version of reality was crumbling. The false narratives, the inflated credentials, the idea that he could weaponize family ties without permission. They were all unraveling, and he had no way to patch it up because I wasn't playing anymore. And then came the final blow. That Friday, I got a voicemail from Veronica. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Mason, I don't even know where to begin. Brandon got a formal letter from a legal team today. Eric's company is pursuing restitution. They're claiming he breached a non-compete and shared proprietary material. Brandon swears he didn't understand the terms, that he was just trying to build a connection with another startup. But the damage is done." She exhaled, shaky. "And now that article is everywhere. People are praising you, talking about your integrity. And he's getting emails from recruiters rescinding interest. Someone told him he's being blackballed. I don't even know if that's true. But Mason, you've made your point. Okay, he's hurting. I'm hurting. Please. Enough." I sat with the message for a long time. Then I deleted it. I didn't respond. Because I'd heard that tone before. From people who weren't sorry they crossed a line, just sorry they got caught doing it. Brandon wasn't hurting because I ruined him. He was hurting because he built a house out of borrowed credibility, and I finally took back my bricks. And Veronica? She wasn't calling for peace. She was calling for pity. But pity is something you earn when you show humility, not when you realize your golden boy is human after all. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. "Brandon, Uncle Mason, I don't know how to fix what I broke. I don't know if I can. But I'm writing because I owe you the thing I never gave you at dinner, the truth. I didn't understand what you did. I thought success had to be loud. I thought influence had to be visible. But now I see that you've been the most powerful man at our table for years, and I was too arrogant to notice. I disrespected you, lied about working with you, tried to use your name to clean up a mess I created. I'm sorry, truly, not for the consequences, but for how I treated you, for what I became. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to hear it from me. Brandon." I folded the letter and set it on my desk. Then I sat back and breathed, not out of triumph, but peace. For the first time in years, I felt like I'd finally stepped out of the shadow they had painted me into, and back into the person I'd quietly been all along. Not bitter, not loud, just focused. A man who knows his worth. And makes sure others do too. I never replied to Brandon's letter. Not out of cruelty, but because, sometimes, silence is the clearest answer. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a regional infrastructure summit. Not a keynote. I'm not that kind of guy. Just a panel discussion about modular design and smart funding models. The kind of quiet innovation no one notices until a bridge holds up during a storm. Before I took the stage, a young engineer approached me, bright-eyed, eager. Hey, I just wanted to say, your story really inspired me. I read about you in the journal. The way you handled everything. That's the kind of integrity I want to build my career on. I shook his hand, smiled, and said, then you're already on the right path. And when I stepped onto that stage, I wasn't thinking about Brandon, or Veronica, or any of the people who used to look down on me. I was thinking about the work, about legacy, and about one simple truth. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming the man they said you'd never be.